take that as a yes. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess now we'll move over to speaker introductions. So we're really grateful to have 4 speakers join us today. So to start, maybe would Dr. Nike Folayan like to introduce herself?
Just checking. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. My name is Nike. I'm an engineer. I work for a company called WSP. I also chair an organisation called the Association for Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers UK. I've been an engineer for many years. I have a strong, I feel I have a strong connection with Imperial because back in the 60s, my dad was a student at Imperial. So when the president of the ACS said there's not many of you can imagine back then, there's probably only 1 or 2.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really glad to be part of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mabenda, are you on the call?
Don't think she is right now.
No? Okay, I'll check with her in a minute if she's having issues with connecting. Okay, but then we'll move on to Dr. Folayan.
Hi, I'm not sure if you can see and hear me. Let me know if you can. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, so I've got 2 screens and I can see you here, but the camera's here, so I'm going to face this way. So I'm Folashade Akinlain Taiwo. I'm a senior lecturer at the Department of Science and Engineering in Queen Mary, and I'm actually from a rival institution to Imperial. So I did my undergraduate and PhD at UCL. So, you know, the rivalry across the I have both my master's in engineering and my PhD in chemical engineering, but my research now is engineering education. But I'll get into a bit more detail with that a bit later.
Great, thank you so much. And then finally, Riham Satti.
Hello, everyone. Yes, Riham Satti. I am an Imperial alum, and it's good to be back. So I did bioengineering back in the day, and an amazing experience. Since then, I kind of went to do started a PhD at Oxford, and kind of then at the result of that, started building a company called MeVitae with the aim of kind of optimizing how employers make better decisions without biases, algorithmic, cognitive, unconscious biases. I run a bunch of kind of women in tech initiatives. I'm a kind of a business mentor as well to early startups, and I'm really interested to kind of hear about what everyone else's views in this debate, really.
Great, thank you. Okay, so before we begin, we just wanted to quickly cover some of the areas we would like to talk about today. So we'll be breaking the discussion into 3 main areas and then finishing with a Q&A. So the first being oriented around career choices and successes and hurdles. The second section addressing issues of racism. And finally, a discussion to close about diversity and inclusion and what diversity and inclusion means to all of us. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, and yeah, I guess we can begin with the first section. So Selena, would you like to start with the questions?
Of course. So I think the first question would be, why did you decide to pursue a career in STEM? You know, what motivated you, and what have you learned from it?
So maybe Riham, would you like to go first?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. What option was there apart from STEM? Let me start from there. Growing up, I've always been interested in all things STEM: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. I'm one of those people that would pick up a Barbie doll and pick up Lego at the same time, right? That's who I was. And it was kind of instilled like that in our family from a very young age. The trouble I had picking was what subject to do in STEM. rather than STEM itself. And I've always been really fascinated with kind of different areas of science, technology, even within medicine as well. And that's why I kind of picked medical engineering as my first choice, because I didn't know what to pick. So I thought, you know what? Is there a course that combines everything? And then there was. So that was kind of my choice and decision. But it was, STEM was kind of always ingrained within me and within kind of our family and our ethos, and it was something we were all kind of very passionate about. Everyone in our family all come from a STEM background, so it was kind of like an insult if I didn't do that, right? And so it was kind of one of those things that just kind of naturally progressed. And I thought the one thing I'll never do is run a company, and here I am running a company. So it's you can never predict what happens in life, but STEM is always one of those things that have been core and fundamental to my upbringing and me and who I am.
Yeah, that was very inspiring. Very inspiring. Thank you. Nike Folayan, do you want to go next? Is that okay?
Yeah, I forgot. I was listening so hard, I actually forgot the question. I think the question was something to do with why I became why the career in STEM. Yes?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, so for me, I like television. That's why. It's actually the case that I was one of those children that would just kind of focus on one particular thing and just kind of want to know everything about it. And for me, it was, you know, how did the people get into the TV box? And at the time, there was just four channels or something. So I just always, and my dad always used to say, oh, you know, if you, if you change the aerial, if you move the aerial, you might be able to get another kind of channel, or you might get a clearer picture. And so for me, that was the fascination. And to be honest, he used to say, oh, that's engineering. And I'd be like, no, this is different. This is just, yeah, it's just something else. You don't really understand. And so I've ended up being an engineer because of television. And this is why, you know, when sometimes parents say, oh, you know, I don't want my kids watching television, I'm like, you know, you just never know what might come out of it, you know. So yeah, so that's essentially why I because I'm very curious and I like to learn about things. And so I studied electronics, and then I decided to well, I didn't decide. I got a job doing a PhD, but it was in aerials, so antennas, to find out how signals actually work. And at the moment, I work in WSP, but what I do in WSP is essentially the same, ensuring people can communicate. So working with not just kind of mobile technology, but also kind of with the fire and ambulance services to make sure they can communicate in an emergency situation and so on and so forth. So I've just literally done what I really have a passion for, and I still have a passion for now. But in addition to that, obviously, I realized that there were very, very few people that looked like me in my industry. And so back in 2007, myself and my brother set up AFBE to kind of promote engineering to underrepresented groups, because going on site constantly being asked to make the fees wasn't very pleasant. And also people assuming that this is your knowledge, and when you know that you know much more. I thought, well, if we have more people looking like me, maybe it'll become a bit more normal and less awkward to say, actually, you should make a tea for me. Thank you very much. I'm leading this meeting. So, yeah.
It's great. It's quite nice as well how, you know, something like a television, you know, spurred your interest and has, you know, brought you all of this way today. So I guess then for Dr. Taiwo, I think from Riham and Nike, so, you know, Riham was saying that she kind of had this interest in a broad range of areas and then went to biomedical. But then for Nike, I guess she had a very specific interest in television. So would you say you had a very specific interest that got you into STEM, or, you know, was it like a broad interest in science and engineering?
Definitely was a broad interest in science and engineering. I went to a lot of summer schools in high school. So that's sort of what really helped me hone in what I wanted to do. So like I think in 9, 10 and 6th form, you know, being again underrepresented in the science and engineering field, I was selected from my school as one of the people to go to these courses, but it worked in my favor because I loved every one of the courses I went on, and it sort of really honed in more and more into engineering and more into chemical engineering, because the more summer schools I went to, the more I got to carve the niche of where I wanted to go. So for me, I really enjoyed the summer schools because that's how I ended up where I am now, which was at a young age. Some like universities were cultivating my interests. And so that's what I continued to do once I got into university, was to ensure these summer schools kept going, because it is important for kids as they're growing up. On a side note, I'm Sade. Dr. Akinmalayan is a bunch of my siblings. I'm just Sade. Let's say that, so you can call me by my first name.
Okay. Sade is.
I'm very informal, so it's fine.
Okay, great, thank you. I guess as well, actually, on the point of the summer schools, when I was doing my A-levels, I did actually go to summer school at Queen Mary's. So they do a Head Start program, I think, with Queen Mary. So I went to one of the general engineering ones. So yeah, I think it's really important that like kind of, that's one of the main kind of things where you get to experience engineering properly. You don't really get much experience or a chance to do work experience when you're, you know, below 18 for, you know, safety reasons and stuff. So yeah, I would definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, and engineering is not so well understood as well, like pre-university, because there's so many different branches of engineering. And if you didn't know the different branches, if you hear engineering, you could think of someone who comes to fix your house because they are called an engineer. And so you might not necessarily realize that they are a type of engineer, but not the engineering that you'll do at university. And so that sort of difference is what you learn by going to these summer schools as well.
Yeah,
that really helped me and you.
So given there's so much of like a broad, like it's such a broad field, like what do you do exactly in a day? Like what are you working on? What are you focusing on right now?
Okay, so so my PhD was in clean water treatment optimization. So that meant my days were spent on my computer, mathematically modeling the process of water and how we can improve the purity. But during the PhD, I then got really interested in education. So I tailored my focus to engineering education and how we can develop the programs students come into. And in order to make it a bit more interactive, a bit more exciting, and just so when training students to be beyond academics, but to be industrialists. Because I found, especially at UCL, a lot of the courses I learned were very academic and theoretical. And I felt after my degree, I was trained to be a researcher and not necessarily trained to be an industrialist. And that's the path I followed. And so my research is more on what can we do to embed professional skills into the courses so students can feel more empowered to make a choice of choosing either research or industry. So my day-to-day at the moment being academic is very varied. And considering I'm at home because of COVID, it means I do spend my days at my screen, but it is talking to students, talking to staff in meetings. I'm still doing research, but day-to-day looks very different to me now. So that's from my side. I'm not sure. Riham, what's your day-to-day like?
Oh, that is such a tough question for me to answer, because I'm what's the word? Jack of all trades, master of none is what I am. And yeah, when I was doing my PhD at the time, I was very dedicated to the research, and you know, you're at your screen 24/7, coding away, and being a founder, building a company with a team, it's a completely different skill set. And it varies at different stages of the organization. When we founded the company initially, my day-to-day was kind of like helping my co-founder build up some of the technology, all the way through to, you know, trying to understand your target market. Now, where we've got a team, my time is spent on kind of talking to amazing people in the HR space, being a bit of a salesperson really. But I'm also the accountant, and I'm also the lawyer, and I'm also the head of HR, and I'm also, so I am and everything really. And it's great like that, because you know what? The challenge I had is I've always had so many interests. I wanted to do everything, and it's very hard to find a career where you do a bit of everything, because I've realized I'm not a specialist. You know, when I was doing my PhD at the time, I was kind of like specializing and specializing and specializing until I knew a fraction of the world's knowledge, where in fact I wanted to be a generalist. I wanted to do the opposite. I wanted to touch every single aspect. I have a chance of designing some logos for some events, and have a chance to be able to talk to some cool people. So my day-to-day really does vary constantly, and also varies on my mood as well. You know, what I feel like doing that day and how I feel about doing something that day. But it comes with amazing responsibilities and amazing challenges, and you meet some incredible people along the way that I would never have done otherwise. And so, yeah, tricky question, but my day-to-day is as open-ended as that question.
Well, I guess then, Nikki, do you feel like any relation to that? Would you say you have a very busy schedule?
Yeah, I think I'm more kind of, I don't have a typical day, but I have a typical thing I do on each day of the week. So, so I have a team, and I have a team in London, another team in Guildford, another team in Manchester, and a team in Bangalore in India. So I have to, and the time, time zones are different. The time, so the guys in Manchester have an early morning. They're in the office by 7. The Londoners come in at 9:30, 10 o'clock, and so it's just trying to organise the most suitable time to kind of meet with my team and arrange the stuff that we need to do. I'm very not typical, so there might be times I'm attending meetings and so on and so forth, but there might be times I'm on site. These days I tend to kind of say, no, you go, someone else go, because initially you're so excited about going on site, and then I spent a year in the Blackwall Tunnel, so I was getting up every day. I was going to work at 6 p.m. every day and getting the train, because I live in Croydon, getting the train from London Bridge back home at 4 o'clock in the morning for a year. And then you think, I do not want to ever be on site ever again. And so I've had a range of experiences, some exciting, some not so much. But these days it's mostly kind of making sure that the team is kind of doing what they're supposed to do, and when there are challenges and projects, technical challenges, then I can kind of help resolve it, and part of my job is actually getting more business for my team. So that means talking to a lot of people. Sometimes it means talking to people you don't necessarily like, but hey, because the industry is still very male, and so it's still very there's still a lot of people that I think they all need to retire, but it all happened. We can just so I should have warned you that I'm not very politically correct. But I'm being I'm being honest, that there are days when I think, well, maybe I need to do an education piece on how you speak to people in general. So I do enjoy it. I do enjoy the education piece, because I think I have a place in my industry to educate people when they kind of talk wrongly or say the wrong thing. So yeah, my days are very interesting most of the time. Sometimes they're very frustrating, but sometimes I really do enjoy it. I enjoy the technical bits, I enjoy the business bits as well. So yeah.
Right, just being mindful of the time. I think we can go on to the next section. So about confronting racism, if you want to.
Yeah, that's okay. So I have two questions in particular. Riham, is it okay if I start with you?
Oh, I have an option. I'm really kidding.
I'll just go anyway. It says, it's like, okay, so have you had any negative experiences during your career that have attributed or been related to racism or to your particular race?
So, being on a kind of a serious note, so as you can tell, I'm female. I fit under the BAME category, and I tick off the diversity boxes, right, that are non so obvious as well. So it's very hard for me to say it's because of race or because of gender or any of those situations. But there was one, I was looking at some stats the other day that I was like, that shows kind of the impact of kind of the metrics in terms of my industry specifically. And because being kind of a female kind of Black founder, right? If you think about raising investment, for example, the odds are kind of stacked against you, right? And I was looking at these numbers, and I see, because there's no, I can't see everyone's reaction, but I just assume everyone's going to be kind of gobsmacked, but I'll say them anyway. So the numbers were kind of like, out of 85 billion in VC funding last year, only 2.2% went to female founders. And if you think about women in color, it's less than 1%, right? And there was a project called Project Diane, and it said that 0.2% of all VC funding went to Black women, right? And if you think about the whole kind of venture funding space, it's like 0.0006% or so. And it's, those numbers don't look too great, right? Especially when you're starting off building a company from the ground up. And in fact, the average amount raised by kind of Black women is about £36,000. So it's, me going in raising investments, right? It's, when you have those statistics, it's really hard, right? To go, okay, what are my chances? And I can't think like that, right? So I can't put and say, my career has, given me a negative impact or anything like that. I think the kind of takeaway message is being that we've been surrounded with amazing investors, non-exec directors in our board that have really helped support us and drive us to get to where we are today. And it's about having that positive energy and making sure that within your career, you're surrounded by these people, so that every experience that you have, it teaches you either a lesson or makes you become a lot stronger as a person to try and drive change. So to kind of answer your question really is to say, it's very hard for me to go, I've had an experience because of race, or I've had an experience because of female, but experiences exist. And there's new initiatives at the moment that are trying to combat that, especially in our industry where, when we're talking about startups, scale-ups, etc.
Okay, thank you for your answer. I think, if the cameras was on, you'd definitely tell that everyone was gobsmacked by those figures, because I was like, I thought they'd be low, but I was thinking like 10%, not 2. Or
yeah. It's hard, it's tricky, and it will change. That's why there's more people building companies every year than there were before. And I encourage people to pick up new skills, become entrepreneurs, change those numbers, those statistics, raise those millions, really. And it's shocking, but it will change.
Yeah, I think your company has a very inspiring story behind it. I would definitely say that. I'm going to push the question forward to Nike, if you'd like to answer the same question. And if doesn't have to be specifically race, you can talk about gender as well. And like potentially a lesson that we could all learn from it as well, if that's okay.
So the question was about, the question was about, I have this thing where I forget the question, and then I remember once I've said what the question is. So, you know, anything that's happened in my career that I could attribute to race, yes, that's the question.
Or gender.
Or gender. Yeah, there's loads of things that happened. There's loads of things. As someone that works in industry and works on site, there are loads of things that happened. I remember once earlier on in my career when a client sent a message to my boss at the time, and he said, "Oh, you know, I got a message from Nike. Oh, I think she was being a bit emotional about this." And my boss just he because obviously his wife, there's a bit of background. His wife's an engineer as well, so he immediately caught on to, oh, okay, this statement isn't just someone expressing an opinion, it's someone expressing an opinion based on the gender. And he got on the phone and was like speaking to him and saying, well, am I being emotional now? Can you tell me when I get emotional? And it just made it a bit obvious that, yeah, that's not the right sort of language to use when you're referring to an engineer in an email. It's not relevant. If I was a guy, he wouldn't have said that. He would have said, oh, yeah, something else, but not emotional. So things like that. And there have been more overt kinds of, when I started in my role, I employed another black female engineer, not because she was black or female, but because she was the most qualified person for the job. And our director at the time, someone said to him, oh, so do you just employ beautiful black women in your team? No, beautiful black poor women in your team. And he said this to me like a joke. And I thought, hang on, you know, the fact that someone said this to you and you didn't immediately have a response to say, no, this is not okay, just shows me that, you know, sometimes even the people that you think are on your side are not really aware of how statements like that come across, and he must have just laughed it away. So given the impression that, yes, it's probably what he's trying to do, trying to build an army or a team of tall black women or something. So things like that happen. And, you know, there are worse ones I couldn't share on here. I've had to kind of report onto, you know, HR, because it's just been terrible. I've had, I remember being on site. So I work with the emergency services, and we were doing a test run of one of the tunnels. And at that point, my director at the time had to explain to them that I was actually qualified to be telling them what they needed to do, which wouldn't have been relevant. And my qualifications is, at that point, was kind of irrelevant, because I didn't need any qualifications to tell them where they needed to be on site or where they needed to go. But for that, you know, they felt they needed to know what my qualifications were to tell them where to actually walk in the tunnel. So yeah, so lots of experiences that I've had, and this is why I fight, and this is why I do what I do, because I think that there are lots of people that have these bad experiences and walk away from the industry and just never look back. And I've seen women in particular walk away from the industry. I've seen black men walk away from the industry because of things like this. So I think that you know, I started at a point to question whether I should start to continue to tell young people that our industry is welcoming. But I do think that the more of us that are aware of what's actually going on, and the more of us can kind of challenge what's going on, the better it is for our industry. Sorry, it doesn't sound nice and flowery, but it's just honest.
Could I just ask as well, just in terms of when you said, you know, someone you thought, you know, you could probably, you know, have some kind of, you know, they would understand you in a way, but that person then said to you that inappropriate comment about, you know, black beautiful woman.
Yeah.
How would you say, you know, for you, if you felt like you could trust this person, you were close to them, would you, you know, calling them out on something like that, you know, how would you go about doing that?
I've learned now. I used to be called, believe it or not, I used to be called a mumbler. I would just never say anything. I'd just be like shocked and like, oh my gosh, this has happened. And I'd just go to ladies and cry a bit and come out and, you know, wipe my tears off and just carry on. But I've learned the time that you do need to confront it, and you do need to say, I found that unacceptable. I don't think that's okay. And please don't do it again. You know, if you don't like them, then you go to HR. But if you do, you tell them what you've done. So yeah, so I did eventually actually call him aside and just register my disappointment in a really nice way. But I had to say to him, no, you know, I expected a bit more. I expected that you'd say something and stand up for us, because we actually are good at our jobs. And, you know, saying, you know, beautiful black women, tall black women, whatever, is unacceptable. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think microaggressions are just so subtle, and they seem to be so subtle, but they're so like powerful to the person that they're being said to. Like, I'm literally so young. I'm only 19. You're all very professional in your careers, and like I've had to deal with microaggressions and comments like that all the time. And that made like the Black Lives Matter movement happening in this July and like quarantine one of the biggest things for me. Like, I was so happy that I could finally speak about it, and then people would actually acknowledge that it was a problem. So yeah, I'm very happy that we like managed to organize this talk and that we can actually speak about this and actually incite some change. Shadi, would you like to talk about your experiences? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. And my experiences are very similar to Riham and Nike's, both of them. And for me, if I talk about lessons learned, so I learned from another colleague to speak out when people are microaggressive towards me or they say things are inappropriate, because I'm on a lot of like equality, diversity and inclusion committees. And I'm a very big advocate for the LGBTQ+ realm. And this is not because I'm a lesbian, but because I think every inclusion matters. And so I'm very big in all meetings about finding a space for that particular underrepresentation. And I think in a meeting, it came out and a colleague, you know, bypassed the fact and said, oh, you're perfect for this committee because you're female, you're black, and you're a lesbian. And I paused and I didn't say anything. And then another colleague picked him up and said, but why does it matter about her race, her gender, or her sexuality? And it was only because that colleague was empowered to then call out an inappropriate sentence that I then started doing it myself. And then I did comment back and say, well, actually, I'm not actually a lesbian. I just think all underrepresentation matters. That when I went to another meeting, and this is very clearly a race-related incident, because I'm the director of student support within Queen Mary, and I go to these meetings with a professional service member of staff. So this is an administrator. And the colleague with me is a white lady. And when I went to the meeting, I entered and I just said my name, Sade, and my colleague said their name. And during the meeting, when it came to speaking to the academics, the chair diverted the question to my professional service colleague and just bypassed me and started speaking directly to my white colleague. And he did this for a while and I didn't correct him. And then eventually I just called him out and said, why did you assume the white colleague was the academic? And he was shocked because I was like, I'm the academic, I'm the member of staff you should be speaking to, I'm the director in this meeting. And that was very clearly a race issue because we were both female, so it wasn't a gender related thing, but two women walk into a meeting and you directed the important questions to the white colleague. And it did make everyone uncomfortable and everyone was embarrassed. And in the meeting, of the three people who were minorities, two of them were professional services, but I was the academic, but he assumed I was professional services because that's the box that they put me in. And that did make the meeting really uncomfortable, but had the other colleague not called out the other colleague for saying that the comment about being black, female and lesbian, I think I would have sat in that meeting and not corrected that person. And so for me, it was empowering to see other people call out injustices when it occurs, because now I feel empowered to do so. And so it was that was very clearly a race issue. And I did get an email apology after, which I responded saying he should have apologized in the meeting. You know, if you called me out on a public platform, you should apologize on that same public platform. But I didn't want to make a fuss in the meeting, so I didn't extend that conversation further. And I just, said what I said in the email. But I do think now lessons from that I've learned is in that meeting to make them apologize there and then. So it's a bit more obvious that they've acknowledged what they've done and they're reminded to not do it to someone else. So that's very clearly a race issue that I've had. And again, being the only Black academic in my school and being the only Black female academic in my school, in my school, we have a lot of ethnic minorities, so I don't get a lot of race issues often. But if you look into the management chain of the university, that's where you see less ethnic minorities. And in my school, I'm empowered to go to these meetings. But often I go to these meetings and there's no context as to why I'm there. And so it's almost often assumed I'm the minute taker or the secretary or a substitute. And then it gets really uncomfortable when I have to explain to them, actually, I'm in the exact same position as you. I'm just from another school. So that's, the issues of race is a thing that does happen, and it is negative. And I have been learning to call it out more and more. I will say I'm very much a listener and then talk later, but I'm realizing more and more I have to call it out when I see it, so it doesn't just fly under the radar. But that is something I'm learning myself. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say I'm in the same boat. I'm like a listen first, talk after same person, like type person as well. But it is inspiring to hear that you felt empowered, definitely, because it is something that we do need to fight actively then and there, instead of waiting and then coming out later. So yeah, I do appreciate you sharing your experience with us. Just in the interest of time, we have one more question about confronting racism. I circle back to Riham. It says, have there been times where people have deterred you from pursuing the career you're currently in? But I'm definitely assuming no, because your family is extremely dead set on STEM. So yeah.
They're dead set on STEM, that's true. Are they dead set on business? That's a different question. I'm only kidding. But running a company comes with its challenges. There's so much to learn in such a short amount of time, right? And you have to try and scale and start up. For me, I was starting from ground zero, right? I knew nothing about business, nothing at all. I didn't know what networking was. I kid you not, the amount of naive comments I've made over the years starting off, I could write a book on them. And I always try to surround myself with people that are supportive, but at the very, sometimes at the early stage, because I was so naive, you can easily get deterred, right, into, second doubting yourself, constantly. Am I doing the right thing? And people, sometimes I've had people come up to me and go, what the flip are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you running a company? Or, you shouldn't do this. And, when you have someone who's 5 foot that walks up to a business meeting and everyone's like, so where's the rest of the team, right? So you do have those comments, but to be honest, it's all around how do you build up from that, right? And if you met me 6-7 years ago, I was this kind of quiet, shy person that would kind of look at the ground and walking, and now I'm happy to speak out. You probably can't get me to shut up. I'm completely the opposite. And you kind of learn to kind of mold and evolve and change the way you think, and you have to do that at an early stage, because, and I'll give you an example of that. So when I started off at the company, networking was very, very tricky for me. The concept of just walking up to a random stranger and going, hey, my name is Riham, scares the hell out of me. And it's awkward, right? I started my company in my early 20s, it freaked the crap out of me, right? And so I had to kind of go, all right, who the hell else is going to be able to do this? If I ain't doing it, no one else will. So I had to kind of force myself. And I would go in with business cards and go, I'm not leaving this meeting so I've spoken to every single person in this room. And you end up building a habit. And it's around then having people around you that have other areas of expertise that you can lean on. And they're the ones that will give you the motivation, that'll give you the push and the drive to forget about negative comments, negative experiences, and they'll let you think about what your goal, your mission, your aim is, because nothing else is more important, really.
Wow, again, very inspiring. I really appreciate the experiences that you guys have. It's like really helpful. It's really insightful. Thank you so much. In the interest of time, I'm just going to move on really quickly. Sorry, Nike. Would you like to unmute?
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were just going to move on to the next question. I'm not going to ask you what the question is because I remember. I think I do. So yeah. So for me, believe it or not, it was my mum. She didn't think engineering was a good idea for me because it didn't make sense to me because my dad was an engineer, my brother is an engineer, and for some reason I should be an architect because that's what she decided that she wanted me to be. And so we had lots of arguments and there were lots of tears as well, because she just thought, you know, this isn't what you should be doing. And until I started actually studying, and then she realized, okay, you're really passionate about this and you're actually quite good at it. It took a bit of convincing for her to see the bigger picture. So this is why I think it's so important that parents we engage with parents, because they do have a strong influence on what young people actually do and what they become. And for me, it was just her thinking, this is not a good idea. And then electronics, or you're probably going to blow up something. And you know, and this, and I mean, there's all sorts of excuses why not. So yeah. So that was my experience. But obviously, we convinced her over time that that's what I was meant to be, and that's what I was meant to do.
Yeah, not to say that it's a Black thing, but within my household, like my older sister went through the same experience with my mom. Like she wanted to do one thing, my mom was like, no, you have to do this thing. But yeah, she did the same thing as you, which is for her. She stuck with her guts with what she wanted to do, and she got there. So it's good. Sade, can I ask you?
Yeah, and I can summarize what I want to say quickly by saying the people who tried to deter me were the people around me, and that would be during the PhD, the ones who were jaded by looking up and not seeing representation above them. So when I wanted to go to an academic route, they were just like, but is that going to happen for you? If you look around, are there people there? And I just always went, well, I'll be there. And so that was sort of how I pushed through. So there are people around me. Some of them are still around me. Some of them I, lose along the way because of negativity. But you do have people who are jaded by the system and they can't get out or beyond that. And so those are the people around me who were trying to deter the path that I was trying to take. And in the interest of time, so that's what I have to say.
I'm sorry, like we'd actually love to hear more. Like I know I would, I definitely would. And I'm pretty sure the rest of us do as well. But yeah, thank you very much, guys, for answering my questions. Okay, so we're gonna move on to diversity and inclusion, I believe. So yeah, Ciara, if you wanna lead that section, that's okay.
Yeah, so I guess we've already kind of touched upon some of these points already, but what I would like to pose to you all is, I guess intrinsically from what you've already said, diversity and inclusion means a lot to you. But how do you think as young people, how can young people go about, trying to promote diversity and inclusion? And, especially for people who, not just black young women, but, any person who's passionate about wanting to increase diversity and inclusion, how do you think is a good way to go about doing that? So yeah, maybe start with Nike.
Sorry, not necessarily in a committee or anything, but even just in everyday life.
I can't hear you properly. Can you speak a bit louder?
You just come close. It's fine.
You hear me?
It's a bit quiet.
It's a bit quiet, yeah.
Oh, that's strange.
Are you using your laptop speaker, laptop microphone?
I was just saying,
Okay, that's better.
Even in everyday life, or as you were mentioning when you had a comment that was very hurtful, and that you've learned to respond, because that also helps people. Even in the meeting, they don't necessarily know, they learn from you, like not necessarily being part of committee, what in everyday life has helped you as well to embrace that and to promote that?
Okay, so I'm just going to start from what people can do. I think the most important thing that you can do if you think that diversity and inclusion is a good thing is educate yourself. Educate yourself about diversity, not just about your own, not just about gender, not just about ethnicity, not just about sexual orientation. Just educate yourself, because no one knows all the answers and no one has all the knows all the right things to say. We all kind of can say the wrong things about different things. So that's the first thing to do. Second thing to do is you have to be open to making mistakes. You have to be open to saying the wrong thing, and you have to be open to not be offended when you're being corrected. So it's a personal thing. It's a personal journey that lots of us have had to kind of learn over time, that you're not going to so for example, I did a talk with a colleague of mine, and he was kind of presenting and talking about one of our female mentors, and he was like, she's such a lovely, kind, sweet, and someone actually found that quite offensive, because it was like, would he actually say that if it was a guy? So at that time I just thought, okay, you're a bit OTT, to be honest. But I think that the most important thing is that your threshold, understanding your threshold is different from somebody else's, and understanding that, the fact that they're offended by something doesn't mean that you're right and they're wrong. It just means that you need to be aware of what you're saying or what you're doing to people. And then the other thing is, I always think that you have to start from really young. So talking to young people, exposing them to different sorts of people. So that's through AFB, for example. When we go into school, we like to have all shades of people. So we don't just go, not just ethnic minority people, but a range of people, so that young people can see that regardless of whatever ethnicity you are, whatever, you can be an engineer. So what I'd say for life, as I said, is just make sure that you're aware and make sure you're educating yourself, and find opportunities to. This is a good forum for education. More forums like this. It's good to kind of hear people's views and just kind of really listen and really understand that your threshold is different from everyone else's.
It's quite interesting what you're saying, about people being worried about saying the wrong thing. I think a lot of people generally might feel like that. I definitely agree. If you want to, really be part of ensuring that there is, more diversity, that is probably one of the main steps towards doing it, accepting the fact that you need to learn throughout the process as well. So Riham, do you have any kind of, anything you can relate to in what Nike said?
Oh, no, I completely agree in everything she just said, actually. So I are in this sector, kind of D&I and inclusion, belonging is my space. And I work with corporates and enterprises specifically on this. And I think the way I like to think about it, and I wish I came up with this quote myself, but I didn't. And the way I think about it is, diversity is about having a seat at the table, right? Inclusion is having a voice at that table, right? And belonging is having that voice being heard, right? And being able to differentiate between each and one of those. And it comes down to, as Nike was saying, about educating yourself. And biases are one of the main reasons for lack of diversity and inclusion all around. And it's not anyone's fault. It's just because of the way our brains are wired, right? We all have unconscious biases, cognitive biases. There are tests. There's a test called the implicit association test, or the IET test, that you can do online, that was developed by Harvard University in the 1990s, that it'll take a couple of minutes to do, and it'll tell you what your biases are, if anyone's interested, because everyone has a bias, but they never know what it is sometimes. And then if you want to be kind of thinking about this inclusion, it's educating is one thing, being open to make mistakes, and then action, right? There's a lot of, in my space especially, a lot of talk about this, but what we want to see is convert it into action. So by action, does it mean, when you have events, do you phrase what you've written to be more inclusive? Do you have wider friends of circles or people you can communicate with that have different opinions? And it's okay to have different opinions, because you can actually learn off the back of that. And even when you're like applying to roles or talking to employers and stuff like that, D&I has become such an important topic and such an important area of focus. And so what I'd say is, even if you're applying to roles, right, think about how you're framing your CV, and think about how you write, your cover letters, etc., personal statements. All of that has a big impact from a diversity and inclusion perspective. But definitely, completely agree with Nico, what she's saying. It definitely is, being able to educate yourself, being open, and then acting on it.
Great, thank you so much. And then I guess, Shadi, what's your view on this?
It was great what you said, the diversity is a seat at the table. The inclusion is having a voice, and then belonging is me having this voice. Can I use this again? It's just
it's not even mine, so that's what I'm saying. I wish it was mine. So yeah, go for it.
It's perfectly put. Thank you very much for that.
No worries.
Even I think I'm going to steal that quote from whoever that source is. So if you know who they are, I can quote them.
Yeah, her name is Liz. Let me get the name out. And I'm terrible at pronouncing names as well. So the name is Liz Foslin. And I apologize to Liz if I've said it wrong.
But in terms of me, I honestly have not much to add behind what Nika and Riham have said, because I agree with everything they've said 100%, that it is about, educating, getting a voice heard, doing some actions. What I could say, which is, I think you asked about what you could do yourself, and that what I did during university was I got involved with a lot of organizations, whether it was the university doing outreach, or anything in the EDI space, or external organizations. And I started doing that as an undergrad, simply because, again, as I said, I looked in my space and didn't see many people like me. So, I would obviously go to these events, and I would get asked questions like, why do you do engineering? Or, why are you here? And in undergrad, I did make jokes about being from a Nigerian family and having, little choices of where I could do and where I could go. But why I was doing outreach was really to get my space out there a bit more, so people understood it was an option, and it is a wide variety. And again, I intentionally, because I went to an all-girls school, at an all-girls school, physics wasn't pushed, and that was at my particular all-girls school. So I made a point of going back to all-girls schools to talk about engineering, and that was the EDI space that I chose as an undergrad. But obviously, as I've gone through, I've branched out, and like Nika said, I did my research. So I initially started in the spaces that I was comfortable and familiar with. And then I started to branch out once I got educated. And then I started going to other people's events for myself to get educated. So not necessarily as me being a speaker, but to be an audience member, just so I could then understand like what spaces there are, what they've done, how they've done it. And if I had events, if I could invite them. And that was sort of how I started, really starting to promote EDI in that space. And, I started doing that as an undergrad. So there's a lot of things you can do from quite early, and then just keep the momentum going, because as you keep EDI in your focus, you will start to figure out, what you can do, what you can't do, and what you're interested in doing as you go along. So that's sort of, what I would say if you wanted to do it day to day, like that's sort of what you could do.
Yeah, it's like kind of like a chain, someone has the courage to speak about it themselves and share the knowledge with other people. You hear the knowledge and spread it with others. Yeah, it's important that kind of then everyone is really getting involved in it, so then you can keep that chain going, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess then since it's just gone 5, I think that then kind of closes the final discussion. So I guess on behalf of WSET and ACS as well, we're really grateful for all the time you spent with us today. Thank you so much for your time. And I think what we'll do now is open it up to questions.
So again, if you have any questions, you can use the chat, or you can go on dolly.menti.com and use the code that was provided in the chat. I will just start sharing my screen.
And Stefan has also added to the chat the name of the woman who had the quote that Riham said. So thank you, Stefan.
The quote that Riham came up with.
Okay. We have 3 questions here. Again, if you want to ask questions, you can use the chat, or you can use the Menti page with the code that's shown at the top of this slide. So let me see. So we have 3 questions here. For Riham, did your PhD help you in founding your company? So do you want to answer this, Riham?
Yeah, let me try. So, did my PhD help me found the company? Yes, I guess so. There's a lot of because I come from a neuroscience background, and the work I'm doing at the moment is trying to uncover or help companies become fairer in their workplace. And there's a lot of science behind kind of D&I, specifically from a neurological point of view, right? In my space, a lot of people talk about unconscious bias, but people don't talk about the other 144 other cognitive biases that exist in the human brain. So I spend a lot of my time like talking to these organizations from the knowledge that I gained during my PhD around the kind of the science behind HR and behind decision making. And then specifically, if I'm talking about myself personally, that's the other way I can think of this question. So the skill set that I've gained, there are definitely lots of skills that I've gained from doing a kind of a PhD, or starting off that journey as doing a PhD. I learned the whole, there's so many different skill sets. So when you run a company, it's all about being lean, about agile, about learning fast, failing fast. And when I was doing a PhD, it was kind of like, become very accurate, be very accurate, don't make mistakes. And so there's lots of skills that helped, and there's skills that didn't help me. And some of the skills that definitely did help me is, initially starting off, being able to come from a technical STEM background and going into a sector that was the complete opposite, right? There's so many skills I can draw from that, from communication, from being able to how to position yourself in your organization. So the short answer to that question is yes.
And so thank you for that. Next question is, where do you see yourself in 5-10 years? So have someone else wants to answer first.
That feels like an interview question. Do I get a job after? Where do I see myself? Okay, so where do I see myself in 5 years? At the moment, I'm leading Team WSP. I see what I'd like to do is I'm very, very passionately interested in smart technology and smart technology in unusual spaces. So I'd like to think that in the next 5 years I'd be doing I'd be working on projects that allows me to use my knowledge of technology to influence the way that we do things, so that it makes it better for people rather than just technology for technology's sake. Now, in 10 years, I'm hoping that I've made enough money to retire. So, I don't know, but that's my ambition. My ambition in life is to be able to retire young. so I'm working towards that in more than one particular way. I hope I get the job after this. I've tried my best there.
And then maybe Sade, well, what about you? Where do you see yourself in the next 5-10 years?
I can definitely take the 10-year plan. So within the next 10 years, I want to be a professor, and that would make me the first Black female professor in engineering. So that's definitely my 10-year plan. I would say 5 years, but I know I've got so much more research to do. 5 years is just, and I want a life. So I'm trying to do it. Yeah, because I don't just want to work all the time. If I wanted to work full time, 5 years is doable, but I will have no friends. So I've gone for the 10-year plan. But in the next 5 years, I'm currently working on developing the new program within engineering at Queen Mary. So within 5 years, I'd like to see the first set of graduates come out of that program, just to be able to see, you know, where they end up, what career progresses they get, and if they become better engineers based on the program developed. So that's sort of why I see myself in 5 to 10 years.
Great, thank you. And then Riham, so I guess the same question to you.
I like the retirement answer, actually. I might just pinch that. Serious note, I, want to continue building this company and seeing where it goes, is the short answer. We've got lots of big plans, and we're scaling and growing the team, and really want to be able to create this kind of fairness in workplace agenda in organizations. So my kind of plan is to help organizations become more diverse, inclusive, and have that sense of belonging, not just within us, but with everyone else. So it's I don't know how long that's going to take. It might take 5 years, it might take 10, it might take 15. But if I can help people kind of unleash their potential and let organizations discover that potential equally in a meritocratic society, then I think I that's a goal that I want to achieve. I want to see myself and others achieve as well.
Okay, so then Selena, which question shall we go for next?
Yeah, that is great. That's such a sweet thing as well. So would you see yourself like as a mentor, for instance?
I do a lot of mentoring. I'm mentoring at the moment quite a few startups, and you know what? It's so important to have, and I think that's like one recommendation I'll give to anyone. Surround yourself with people that you aspire to be around and want to look up to, because you learn so much at the back of that, to be honest. I've learned a lot of my skills. I could have done it would have taken me so much longer, to be honest, to develop a lot of the skills that I needed to build a company. But to have mentors and have people around you was so important. And my aim and my ethos was, if I can share some of that knowledge with other people as well, just to help them accelerate, which might lead on to the next question, is what would you recommend a person with a STEM academic background to go into industry with? Is networking. So one skill I didn't have that I should have had the day I was born, right, is networking. Talk to people and don't be scared, don't be afraid. LinkedIn, go to events. I know with COVID it's harder, but webinars, whatever. Put yourself out there and do it with confidence, really, and get a mentor.
Yeah, so
really quickly, sorry, Riham, sorry, is that okay? Can I just quickly really ask, Riham, how would you get a mentor?
Yeah, I was about to ask the same thing, actually.
Yeah.
How do you get a mentor? Get multiple mentors, not just one, get multiple. Ones that are specialized in different things. So if you want to become an entrepreneur, get a business entrepreneur, get someone in finance, get someone in every industry and every sector. Don't get too many, of course, but it's hard to tell what the number is. How to find a mentor. They are people that you aspire to, and it's about reaching out to them. You can either reach out to them on LinkedIn or Twitter, etc. You don't need to necessarily go, can you be my mentor? It's not one of those conversations. It's a bit more gentle and subtle. You have a conversation, have a coffee, grab a chat with them, and then maybe send them regular updates. Tell them, hey, how are you doing? How are things going? Tell them what you've been up to, and then do you know what? That becomes a regular affair. And before you know it, you've actually built a relationship with someone who you look up to, and you can then go to them, we've been doing this regularly, maybe, can I call you a mentor? And it's like, if you've already built a relationship of 6 months, a year with them, it's kind of like, oh, no brainer. So, and our mentors, some of them actually became our investors in our company, in fact. And so that's just a few tips.
Thank you for answering my question.
Do you think it's the case as well for industry? So that was more for business, but what do you think, Nike? So like, since you're in an industry as well.
For the question, what do you recommend to a person going into industry?
Like transitioning from, you know, if I understand
academia to industry. So the first thing that you must do is play the fool, act like you are there and you don't really know what's going on and you're just fresh, because I found that a lot of people, especially if you're going from academia into industry, people have a complex about you, and this is the truth. They think that you're coming in to challenge them, to tell them how to do things, and you are, but sometimes it's best to just underplay your skills and then shine when you need to. So first thing is what a bit of humility would do. So go in there like you don't know what's going on, because you don't actually know what's going on. You might know the detail, you might be able to do the technical bit, but there's some processes that you might need to learn. And then over time, start to kind of find people that are your allies. You will need, you will, exactly. You will need allies, because you will find that people, some people will be impressed by your kind of skills and your talent, and some people will just dislike you just for having those skills and talent. So find those allies. That's the first thing you do. Find those allies and share with those allies. So not a formal mentorship sort of thing, just a kind of a informal chat, to have a coffee with them, you know, just share your day with them, ask them for pointers, and then just be ahead of your game, because people again will try to challenge you. So if you have a meeting, don't go to a meeting without actually knowing what the meeting is about, or without having some sort of kind of thing that you can talk about in the meeting. And then don't ever let someone else share your own ideas. So what I did in industry, which is wrong, which is I went to every meeting, and anytime I had something to say, I'd talk to my line manager, what blah 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 blah, and then he'd say it and he'd sound really clever, and I'm like, well, that was all my idea. And he's come across as, you know, and it got to a point that, you know, he started saying, yeah, I thought of this, I thought of that, and I was like, no, you did not. I did. So generally, I think what you should do is, when you go into industry, find allies. Number one, go in there assuming you don't know what it's about, so a bit of humility, but also know that you know, because be confident in your abilities, because you worked hard for it and you know what you're talking about. And when it's time to shine, then you can really shine. And people, the management, the people at the top will see that you're a star, and you'll get those opportunities, and you'll get those kind of breaks from those people. But yeah, it's so important that you find allies.
Yeah, do you think it's the same thing? A question for Shadi instead. Do you think it's the same thing in academia? Like, do you know, is there a similar thing where you need mentors, or you know, a bit of humility at first? Or do you think that it's comparable, or is it different if you stay in academia?
I actually think it's comparable. So definitely in academia, I needed allies. And so I needed white men in the rooms having the conversations and advocating for me to be in those rooms. And so, and like Riham said, I have a lot of mentors. I have female mentors, I have male mentors, I have mentors who are Black, mentors who are Asian. Like, I have a variety of mentors who help me with different aspects of my personality. So naturally, a bit like Nika said, I would actually do a lot of things where I would email all my ideas ahead to someone else in that meeting so they could say it, because I hated being center of attention. And it just meant that in meetings, I was being lost because I wouldn't talk. But all the meetings everyone agreed with were mine. But it never came from me because I never spoke, and I didn't speak because I was shy. And so it was like learning from, learning from my mentor that I had to be the person to say my ideas. And, you know, just having that from the mentors, and then having allies or advocates who put me into rooms as well. And academia is very similar in that way. You really need someone to help guide you, and I guess a bit like Riham said with networking, someone to help you identify and understand how to say things and when to say things and when to question and when to not. Like, so, and you learn a lot of things from them, that for mistakes you don't have to make yourself. I got a mentor quite late, so I made a lot of mistakes along the way, which were, you know, allowing other people to say my ideas. So it just meant that, you know, I wasn't advancing as fast as I probably should have done. But when I had the advocates and they realized those ideas were mine, I was parachuted. So at Queen Mary, and I can say this, I was promoted in under 2 years. At UCL, I was there for 4 years and I wasn't promoted. So, you know, and I changed the way I behaved at Queen Mary. So it makes a difference. So that's a recommendation I would have as well, which they said mentors, allies, advocates, all of it.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
I was going to say, can I add something to that as well? Like, the other thing that I realized back when I was a student was fear of taking risks, right? Constantly worrying about, you know, what will happen if I did this. It's that kind of, I want to make sure everything's right before I take that leap of faith, right? And when you come out of that and you go into industry, it's more like the opposite. You jump off the cliff and you build the parachute as you go along. It's not the other way around. So don't be afraid to take risks as well.
Definitely. I feel like that's something that I have a problem with personally. So yeah, it's quite interesting to hear from all of you that that's kind of the same thing from when you were earlier in your careers. So I guess let's move on to the fourth question now. So have you seen things improved since you've started in STEM? So I guess this is more to do with inclusion and diversity. So maybe Nike, would you like to start?
Certainly, I do think things have improved, believe it or not. I remember having a conversation with my dad and talking about the challenges that I faced, and he's like, well, at least when you walk down the corridor, no one kind of ducks into another room just so they don't walk past you, so you're doing really well. You know, from when I started in industry, things have actually improved. First, the statistics shows there are more ethnic minority people in engineering. When back in 2007, when we started AFDE, there was only 4%, now there's 9%. So things have actually improved. And I think that especially with the year that we've had, I think people, especially when it comes to ethnicity, people are starting to recognize that, you know, people are starting to have a voice. I think Farouk said people, you know, having a voice to say, you know, this is unacceptable to me. So I think things are improving in STEM. I think that women particularly still have a huge challenge in STEM industries, because you still get the banter. Was it last week? So I've just come off maternity leave, and I said, well, I can't go on site, and someone said, well, you know, I'm sure they have ladies boots in your size that you can go on to site. So things like that still happen, and those are the things that we need to start to kind of change. So things have improved, but I don't think they've improved enough. Especially as a woman, I don't think they've improved enough in STEM. I think women are still at a disadvantage. I think ethnic minorities are still at a massive disadvantage in STEM. Leadership figures shows that only less than 0.5% of board members of top 100 engineering companies are ethnic minority, and it's 0.2% when it comes to black. So it's shambolic, and so I'm not saying things haven't improved, but I'm not happy that they haven't improved fast enough. I think is what I think.
Riham, Sade, any kind of, you know, do you agree?
Yeah, I guess I'll just say cosign.
Yeah. I think yeah, I completely agree with that. It is slow. It is changing, but it is slow. And even when I talk to organisations, there was something called the Tech Inclusion Pledge that was signed many years ago when Obama was president, and 30 organisations signed that Tech Inclusion Pledge saying that they were going to release their diversity numbers year on year. And at that time, the number of women in the workplace was like 24% in those organisations. BAME was about 8% or so. It hasn't moved hugely, kind of like what Nike was saying. It's moving, and the problem is why it's not moving is purely because the methods at the moment are being used to try and increase D&I in organisations is quite rudimental. Bias training you can't change mindsets like that. And so what we need to look to is kind of using technology and trying to be able to use that to be able to try and move the dial. But it needs to happen at the senior leadership level. The number of people since the kind of the BLM protests, organizations are hiring a lot more diversity and inclusion employees. It's gone up by a ridiculous number. I think it's at least 4 to 10 folds. However, they're not at senior level. They don't have the budget or the power to make those changes. And so therefore the only way we can move that dial is for these kind of people to be able to have the budget to make the change, and then be able to create a diverse and inclusive culture from the ground up beyond the rudimental methods. So completely agree with Nike, and I think it's high time we have like new ways of doing that.
And then I guess in terms of, people and the lack of Black females being in senior positions, I guess, would you say maybe part of that as well is just the environment in itself, not encouraging people to stay within their chosen area and progress?
Is that directed to me or?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that glass ceiling is there, right? There's a glass ceiling, and then sometimes it's concrete, and sometimes it's brick, and sometimes these for example, if someone goes on maternity leave and then comes back, right, there's that time, right? But no one accounts for that time, do they? And then you say you have a CV that says career break because of maternity cover, and they go, so what skills have you lost in that time? It doesn't add up, right? And if when you try it, I can see Nick again, yes. And I'm like, it's kind of, that glass ceiling exists, and it's about trying to like break that glass ceiling, right? And being able to, the only way we can do that is, I've seen a lot of organizations have like working groups, right? For women and for BAME, etc. And to try and be able to push that, but you need a support network. So I created like a Women in Tech and Females Founders Network. There's about just over 2,000 women on that network, right? And they're all there kind of trying to support each other, going, I've had this experience, etc. And it's, the only way we can do that is being confident, and confidence is definitely an important skill to stand up for what you believe in and go, do you know what, I don't think this is fair, and a lot of people, for example, don't even negotiate salaries. For example, I've seen that time and time again. So it's not being afraid to ask and to question, and then making sure that we're being transparent and open. That's why gender pay gap reports existed. Whether the numbers are accurate is another thing, but they're there for a reason, to be able to kind of create that transparency. But there is a kind of, that glass ceiling exists. We just need to smash the hell out of it.
Yeah, indeed. So I guess then, if it's okay, we can move on to the last question, since we're coming close to the end of the time. So I think this is quite a nice closing question as well. So maybe starting with Sade, what other organisations do you think are good to get involved in for Black women in STEM and business to lead change?
So the organizations that I've sort of been involved in, I guess I can talk about it from that way, is there's one called STEMettes, and I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it, but STEMettes is a really good organization to get involved with. And again, it's either as a panelist or as an observer. Like, they do so many different variety of events that you could just learn by either attending or asking to be involved in the organization of events as well. Then I would say I'm a Twitter activist. So there are a lot of organizations that I see via Twitter that I just get involved with in the discussions. And funnily enough, so before I met Nike today, I've actually been stalking AFBE via Twitter as well, which is a good organization to get involved with, because you do have organizations who are speaking to people from a variety of experiences, whether it's students or industrialists or academics, and they're trying to get you involved in a wide variety of places. And that could be you mentoring people younger than you, or even getting a mentor yourself. And so I think it depends on what representation you want to have or be. So those are the two organizations, oh, and WES, but that's more for general. So Women in Engineering Society, like that's more general women, but even as a Black woman, like they do some diversity events for it as well. So WES is a good one too. But I'm talking at it from, because again, I'm an academic, most things that I want to get involved with are education based. So I always look for organizations that can help my students or students I want to be my students. So I look younger. So that's the difference between what I look for in organizations. But I'm sure Riham and Nika have a wide variety of more organizations that might be looking towards people looking to build up with change.
Yeah, I guess, and then Nikki, I guess since you are chair of AFBE, so would you say there's, what opportunities are for kind of young people maybe to get involved with your organisation?
So yeah, thanks Shadi for that as well. I thought, am I gonna say anything? No, I don't. Yeah, so there are lots of opportunities to get involved. So obviously AFB looks at the whole life cycle, so from very young to their programs for primary school, secondary schools, but there's also our programs for university students, as well as professionals starting out in industry, because we know how challenging that can be. And then there's also a leadership program, which we started recently to talk about the issues around people kind of progressing in industry. I think the organisation is such that whatever level that you want to get involved in, if you want to be kind of really actively involved, or you just have an hour here or there to kind of engage, and then it's open to that. It's very flexible because everyone, it's a volunteer-led organisation as well, so everyone that is on the board of AFB is volunteering their time to do stuff and to make a difference. But what it does do is it links you up with people that you can share experiences with. I've met some of my closest friends via AFBE, and we share the profession, we share our stories, some really good stories, but some really sad stories as well, and we encourage each other to just keep on going. And you really need that in industry. You need to have people that you can share the experiences with, and they can say, yeah, that's okay, it's not you, it's the industry, and the industry needs to change.
Definitely, I agree. And then I guess Riham saying that, have you felt that you have been supported through these kind of organizations? And also, since you were saying that you founded your own network, again, the same question in the sense that, how can young people maybe get involved with your organization?
Yeah, no, I'm always interested and intrigued to talk to people that do have an interest and a passion in this, whether it be me kind of offering help or just some tips or just grabbing a chat. More than happy to do that. And I'm always looking at ways to be able to try and move that dial with action. I think I've done so much talking, I can't do any more in this space. I need to see change directly and physically. So I'm always happy to talk to people who have ideas, who, want to contribute and try and lead change. And, feel free to email me. Email is riham.satti@mevitae.com. But other organizations as well that you can tap into. There's something called the Tech Talent Charter, with about 400 organizations on that signatory, which they have listed. They're the organizations, including ourselves, that will release their diversity numbers to that charter. So you can see, because we're quite a diverse team, it's quite, it'd be very ironic for me to have not a diverse team telling organizations to be diverse. So, within ourselves, we try and be as diverse and inclusive as possible. And on that signatory also includes what initiatives these organizations have done themselves that are related to D&I and STEM. So, what has Age UK done? what has MeVitae done, what has Sky done. So you can see a list of them and you can pick the ones that you're really interested in and reach out to the head of those networks and head of these organizations to see how you can work with them. And actually, do you know what? It looks great on your CV and your cover letters when you're applying to roles later on. Beat the current hiring process.
Okay, I guess then, since there aren't any more questions, I think that brings us to the end of the session. So yeah, I mean, Farouk, Selena, do you want to say anything at the end?
Yeah, just thank you guys. Like, you guys are very inspirational, very good. You've got really good experiences that you've been willing to share with us. So thank you for giving up your time to talk to us and inspire us. We really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was really insightful.
It's been
Really inspiring to hear.
Sorry?
Yeah, Selena, I think you're quiet again.
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think just about, yeah.
I was just thanking you for your time and how it was very insightful and inspiring. So thank you so much.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thanks for organising it. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, at the time's actually gone so quickly as well, you know. So yeah, it's been really good. And yeah, I think everyone, definitely people saying in the chat, thank you so much as well. And yeah, I'm really grateful to have the chance to speak to you all, and you're all really inspiring women. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I guess that's it then. Have a good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care, all.
Bye.